All right, ladies and gentlemen. So we knew that Emmanuel Macron and Brigitte were watching this series, but I am so pleased to report that so is their surrounding cast, or their former surrounding cast, I guess. Last week, we discussed Alexander Banala. I introduced him to you, their former deputy chief of staff, who was caught impersonating a police officer and kind of beating the living heck out of protesters in the street. Well, guess what? 2 days later, that young gentleman began following me on Instagram. I say the more the merrier, so welcome back. Hello, Alexander Panala. Welcome back to our series, Becoming Brigitte. Honestly, I couldn't believe it when I saw it. It was like a priority note on my Instagram. It's like Alexander Banala started following you. And I was like, whoa, okay, obviously, whoa, what's the meaning of this? I'm not exactly sure what the purpose of the follow was, given the fact that my profile is public. So you don't have to follow me. You can just look at my profile privately. I take it that he wanted me to know that he was following me. But you guys know me, I never squander away an opportunity. So I basically hit him up in his DMs. I slid into Alexander Banala's DMs. Here's what I said, okay? I said, I'm glad you're enjoying my series. Would you care to participate in it, to have your voice added? And look, it says seen 12 hours ago. Alexander Banala left me on red. So sad, very sad. Anyways, I guess we'll just give him some time. Maybe he'll respond. Maybe he'll contribute. The point of that always is I want to make sure that I am representing people the correct way. We've asked Brigitte. We've asked Emmanuel. Nobody wants to give me any answers. So what we're going to do this episode is just start where we left off. We discussed Veronique, and that was extremely explosive, obviously, for a lot of people to learn that you had this individual who was obviously highly intellectual and talking about Chopin and speaking about poetry and Paul Verlaine and speaking about how they needed this platform, talking about a show in 1977 to essentially advocate so that there were, well, transgendered rights. And I want to specifically speak about Veronique in terms of what was offered, something that we didn't hone in on last episode. There was a part of the correspondence which is going to become significant. So when the interviewer asked Veronique, do you live alone? Remember, Veronique responded and said, I'm not with anyone, but I've lived with a woman and conceived this union in the style of George Sand and Chopin. Chopin was probably a transsexual. His style of melody, the way he plays, makes this quite clear. I think the image that has been given of the Rimbaud-Verlaine union is a distorted, caricatured image that doesn't correspond at all. So this trans individual who speaks exactly like Brigitte Macron, according to AI Tech, they say this is the same person, although the voice has aged over time. They have those same tics in speech, that is to say, that is to say. But we learn in that little correspondence that that trans individual, or identifying as a trans individual, said, or actually said, I've always viewed myself to be a woman, was using this name Veronique for the sake of the interview and confessed to living with a woman in the style of George Sand and Chopin. Whatever that means, we know this person has a partner of some description, a friend, a partner. I don't know. I really don't know what that means. But then we learned that Jean-Michel Trogneau, in another strange coincidence, shortly after this interview took place, happened to marry a woman named, yeah, you guessed it, Veronique, of course. Veronique Drew, we are now introducing to you, and Jean-Michel had their marriage take place on November 24th, 1980, in Blangy-Tronville, a city named Blangy-Tronville, or a town named Blangy-Tronville. The union was only announced, by the way, after the fact, okay? So did not occur after the fact. The local newspaper, Le Courrier Picard, ran a little bit about it. And in that, since not all of us speak French, it specifies that the union between these two, between Monsieur and Madame Jean Trogneau and Madame Jacques Drew, took place in the strictest privacy. Where have we heard that before? We've heard that before, haven't we? In the strictest privacy. I remember Tafone used that exact same language when she described the burial of her father. Only we later learned that her father wasn't buried. He was cremated, but whatever, that's what Paris Match said. In the strictest privacy. So Jean-Michel Trogneau getting married. I don't know many people who get married and want to make sure it is in the strictest privacy, but that's what happened between these two individuals, Veronique and Jean-Michel Trogneau. And you'll never guess who was the witness to this wedding. Brigitte Trogneau. So man, these siblings are really close, which makes it even stranger that down the line, this person who's claiming to have been Brigitte Trogneau, who is living in the Élysée Palace as the first lady, just tried to cut her brother, Jean-Michel Trogneau, out of her life until journalists sniffed it out that there was somebody that was missing. But yes, it is recorded that Brigitte Trogneau was the witness, the only witness that signed to this strictly confidential wedding, okay? Then what happens next is it's recorded that Jean-Michel Trogneau and Veronique Drew had a child, Jean-Jacques Trogneau. That is the child that we showed you that looks almost identical to Emmanuel Macron. It's really hard to convince me that these two people are not related, but they're not, guys, not according to the official legend. They're definitely not married. That's Brigitte's side of the family. And then 2 years later, Jean-Michel Trogneau and Veronique Drew have a daughter, Valerie. Then very shortly thereafter, they get divorced. Their divorce is finalized in 1987. Now, then things get super interesting. Post-divorce, Veronique Drew remarries years later, 1998, a man named Alain de la Simone. He is a major insurer from Amiens. Now, something worth noting is that after her marriage to Jean-Michel, Veronique classes up. Like, she now has money and she begins living a life, the high life that she never lived prior to, okay? Can happen. I guess you can class up in life, but it's just worth noting that she's living in a way that she hadn't lived before. So naturally, the journalist Xavier Poussard contacted her. That seemed like a good place to start. Like, if you're trying to determine whether or not Jean-Michel Trogneau transitioned and became Brigitte Macron, you have to be willing to accept some evidence that would point to the fact that you are wrong, that your thesis is wrong. And thus far, everybody's coming up dry. It's just they don't want to give you any answers. We're getting these manufactured pictures or pictures that can only come through Best Image, only come through Mimi Marchand, which are images that should not, of course, be trusted because Mimi Marchand has an extensive criminal history. She has been accused of many a forgery, many of extortion, and she's in a lot of trouble right now. So anyways, Xavier Poussard decided to contact Veronique Drew. And guess what? She spoke with him. How strange. Somebody in the family, in the unit, speaking to a journalist. And she wanted to speak with him. You know, when he contacted her on WhatsApp, she said, yeah, let's set up a time to speak in the future. And essentially what she did was she wanted to dismiss these rumors about her ex-husband of many, many moons ago, Jean-Michel Trogneau. And so I'm going to read this portion directly from Xavier Poussard's book, which is available on Amazon, called Becoming Brigitte. And I want you to remember, Xavier Poussard is meticulous. He has kept recordings of every single person that he spoke to along this 8-year investigation. So from his book, he writes this in first person. So I was looking to contact Veronique Drew. What was the materiality of her marriage to Jean-Michel Trogneau? Who was he? How and when had they parted? After marrying a Trogneau, Veronique Drew continued her upward social mobility by marrying a La Simone, now listed in the Bottin Mondain. That is where I found her number. I contacted on WhatsApp. She agreed to get back to me the next day and did so. Our conversation lasted half an hour. Even though she repeats the wording often heard from the Trogneau entourage, example, "Those women are crazy," referring to Natasha Ray and Amandine Roy, she first pretends not to know what the call is about. About Jean-Michel becoming Brigitte, right? Listen, sir, I don't know. It's ridiculous anyway, because I have 2 children with Jean-Michel. I saw on YouTube that they made a family tree where they even put that I might be Macron's mother? Veronique Drew is, of course, referring to questions raised by internet users about the uncanny physical resemblance between Emmanuel Macron, the husband of Brigitte, and Jean-Jacques Trogneau, the son of Jean-Michel Trogneau. She goes on and says, "Listen, sir, I have been divorced from Jean-Michel Trogneau for many years. Listen, sir, I have remarried and my children are here. I don't want any problems, but I can tell you that Jean-Michel is not Brigitte." That's ridiculous. I had 2 chocolate stores in Beauvais. Well, I had 2 children. It didn't work out, so I went back to live with my mom, and that's all. But I can tell you that Jean-Michel is not Brigitte. Xavier says, "I take her at her word, and I ask her for photos of her shared past with Jean-Michel Trogneau, promising that if they are conclusive, to close the case without even publishing those photos." Veronique Drew says to him, "Brigitte told me not to get involved. I don't want any trouble about my children or about, it's not relevant to the family anymore." Okay. So a couple of things that I want you to remember, just to point out right there about that little correspondence. She tells Xavier that that after the divorce between her and Jean-Michel Trogneau, she went to live with her mother. Okay. She also stresses emphatically that Brigitte is not Jean-Michel Trogneau, but also that Brigitte told her not to get involved. That's quite strange. Just off the bat, that's strange because you have 2 children with her brother. And you mean to tell me that it wasn't just your ex-husband, Jean-Michel Trogneau, the person that you raised your children with, who said anything to you, but rather his sister, your former sister-in-law who told you not to get involved? Okay, that seems a little strange. I would expect her to say, Jean-Michel Trogneau told me not to get involved with this. You guys are all crazy. Go away. But okay, let's park that aside. You went to live with your mom post-divorce, and for whatever reason, you're listening to what Brigitte Macron is telling you to do rather than your should-be ex-husband who you've not mentioned in this conversation and who she does not mention in the capacity of her having a present relationship with, a current relationship with. Okay, so jumping back into Xavier's conversation, back into first person, he says this in his book. "As I, Xavier, argue that she should hold Brigitte Macron to account because it's because of her silence that her own photo, as well as the photo of her children, Jean-Jacques in particular, are circulating on social networks. She cuts me off and inexplicably blurts out, and also, I know Macron's father. Well, I don't know him very well, but he was a surgeon at the Amiens hospital, but I didn't know Emmanuel Macron. We lived in Toulon. I didn't even know him. I saw him at my daughter's wedding, the first time I had ever seen him." Then I can hear another person on the line. Veronique Drew stops, visibly embarrassed, as if she's gone too far. She pulls herself together and asks me, "Well, and what is your name?" End of conversation. So we are to garner from this conversation that someone was in the room. Okay, she said, "I will agree to speak with you." And then there was someone in the room when she was having this conversation with Xavier Poussard that stopped her when she gave a random but very interesting tidbit that she knew Emmanuel Macron's father, Jean-Michel Macron, but she did not know anything of Emmanuel Macron until he appeared at her daughter Valerie's wedding. And needless to say, she never did provide Xavier Poussard with any photos of her ex-husband or their strictly private wedding, anything that could have immediately just dispelled these rumors, these missing years, so to speak, of his life and Brigitte Trogneau's life that would have just put everything to bed. They're never willing to do that, right? So afterwards, Xavier Poussard does what he does best. He's investigated what she had told him. Okay, was Veronique the George Sand to Brigitte Macron's Chopin? Were they perhaps living together? And did she maybe help Brigitte Macron, eventually create an alibi for her past? Or was she telling the truth? Was everybody crazy? And Jean-Michel Trogneau was just her ex-husband, and he's very well and alive. We just can't speak to anybody right now. Well, I can tell you that Xavier was able to determine that there was a very weird pattern of behavior for Veronique following her divorce from Jean-Michel Trogneau, namely that she refused to acknowledge her previous marriage to Jean-Michel Trogneau, even when it was required of her by laws. Okay. For example, in a tax document, here it is, that is dated in January of 1992, she listed that she had only previously been married once to a man named Serge Francois. And by the way, that's true. She had first married Serge and then she married Jean-Michel Trogneau. But of course, she had two marriages and she leaves off Jean-Michel Trogneau. She says, I've only been married once. That is a lie. Who among us would lie on a tax document? That's a very scary territory, right? You don't want to be caught lying on tax documents, and yet she did this. She removed one of her marriages. Then she did it again in a public real estate collective that she put together to purchase her house in Corsica. I think it would be similar to putting your house in an LLC. In 2008, she reported that she had actually never previously been married in a document that was issued by a notary. Okay. She lied in the presence of a notary and again removed her marriage from Jean-Michel Trogneau, who was instructing her to essentially pretend that she had never been married to Jean-Michel Trogneau on documents. She just removed him for the rest of her life, it seems. Everything that Xavier could find. He was also able to determine through documents that she had lied to him over the phone when she said that following the divorce, she went to live with her mother. He was able to find records that revealed to him that actually she went to live in an apartment in Amiens that was owned by Jean-Michel Trogneau's father. So the Trogneau family put her up in an apartment, and I don't know, I guess it's not totally strange that your father-in-law might do that, but what is strange is that you would lie about that years later when people start asking questions about your ex-husband, okay? Very strange. It's worth noting also that right around this time of their divorce, okay, so they're officially divorced in 1987. You can assume they separated sometime before that because to finally get your divorce stamped and done and sealed, it usually takes a little longer, maybe 1 year if you're going really quickly. But that's the time that Brigitte Macron, the Brigitte Macron that we know, okay, the public record Brigitte Macron, that's when she begins her very public and traceable career as a teacher, okay? She goes and enters in 1986 at the Lucy Berger School. Suddenly changes the career, total career change, and then this is all they want to show us. Oh, look, she was a teacher here, and a teacher here, and a teacher there. And of course, the future love of her life, Emmanuel, was just 9 years old, so it was just 5 more years. 5 more years. And then Brigitte Macron, the one that we know, will meet the love of his life. Oh, did I say his? Love of her life. This is a good time to tell you that most of what you think you even know about Emmanuel Macron thus far, his legacy, yeah, it's just objectively not true. Emmanuel had a major hand up in life. This guy is so private. We don't know much about him. What we do know about him is, I would say, quite sinister. It's quite sinister. It's making me think, I don't know, of that movie, The Manchurian Candidate. I'll tell you guys about that after a brief break from our sponsors. I just want to thank Preborn. They've been our sponsors from the beginning of this podcast. We know they are doing such great work. Planned Parenthood is spending millions to target vulnerable women who are being convinced that they should take the abortion pill because it's a quick and easy solution. But what Planned Parenthood doesn't tell these ladies is that there is a devastation that follows. There's pain, there's regret, there's the reality of having ended a life. That's why Preborn is stepping in through innovative technology. Preborn is reaching abortion-determined women before they take that pill, before it's too late. In fact, to date, Preborn's network of clinics has rescued over 300,000 babies and have seen over 90,000 women come to Christ, but it does not stop there. Preborn's network of clinics are with these moms every step of the way, offering them counseling, maternity supplies, and the support that they need to choose life. But they cannot do it without us, which is why just $28 will help to provide an ultrasound to a woman that is in crisis. That is literally it, $28 to help her to see her baby and choose life instead. So if you'd like to donate, you just dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. Again, that's pound 250 baby. Or you can donate securely at preborn.com/Candace. That's preborn.com/Candace. Also reminding you about Goldco. President Trump is back, and that could be obviously great for gold and silver because under Trump's first term, the price of gold soared 53% and the price of silver jumped 51%. Will gold continue to break records in 2025 and beyond? Gold and silver have been used as a store of value for centuries. As you very well know, the government cannot easily manipulate them, and they are known as hedges against market risk and inflation. And that's why I've personally bought gold and silver from my great partners at Goldco. Goldco is a top-rated precious metals company. They have supported this show from the beginning, like I said, and they have helped hardworking Americans purchase over $3 billion in gold and silver. They know what they're doing. So right now, you can get a free copy of their 2025 gold and silver kit. On top of that, you could also qualify for up to $15,000 in bonus silver, possibly even more. So to learn more, head over to CandaceLikesGold.com. Again, that's CandaceLikesGold.com. All right. So regarding Emmanuel Macron, we may have accidentally told you some lies. I don't know. We've been telling you what the media has said about him, and the media has definitely been spinning some tales about him, painting him as this Mozart virtuoso, just ahead of his time, trying to, make everybody acquiesce to this story that is at best a story of statutory rape and could still be prosecuted, by the way, until the end of this year, which would be fascinating. But yeah, the press told everybody he was just this amazingly gifted writer who also loved to play Chopin for Brigitte on the piano. Okay, cool. From Xavier's book in 2020, the myth of the writer Macron was definitively debunked by a journalist. Like, they kept saying that he would write these novels and Brigitte would talk about his passion for writing in interviews. Well, essentially, they realized that, nope, that isn't true. None of that is true. And they created this idea of him really just because they wanted the public to believe that he was this genius and that he therefore deserved to be suddenly in the mist as a politician, that he had this background where he was kind of a boy genius. And like I said, that could not be further from the truth. The reality is Emmanuel Macron's real story is more of a fake it till you make it. Okay. If that's how you would say it, fake it till you make it. As we have stressed before, not much is known about his childhood. Okay, it's weird. It just gets very strange. His mother, we now know, was in charge of the gender reassignment program at the Social Security office. His father was a psychiatrist, but according to Veronique, she had no memory of Emmanuel having been around him. His grandmother, Manette, we know, definitely was involved in his childhood. It's the only one he speaks about affectionately or even relates to his childhood in his book. We also know that grandma had a knack for pedophile-centric books. It was grandma's thing. What are you gonna do? She likes these like pedophile-centric books. She's just like, hey, is that a pederast? Yeah, that's a really cool thing. Let's talk about Andre Gide. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about all of these weird passages. Me and my grandchild's, we share this with one another. Like I said, we learned that he was a bit of a loner. He didn't have many friends. The people that went to school with him didn't even know what his parents did. Well, according to the Wall Street Journal's book, The Calculated Rise of Macron, it was the Rothschild family, the Rothschild bank, that had everything to do with his professional resume. And interestingly enough, Xavier Poussard had discovered that the bank made an internal error in their documents when they listed Macron, who is supposed to be born in Amiens, as having instead been born in Paris. And they made this error on multiple documents, by the way. I'm going to show you a few of them. And the reality is, of course, this keeps coming up, that we are told in the official biography that he's born in Amiens. Then we have the former mayor of Amiens who said, no, he's, Touquetois, like from Le Touquet area. Now we have the Rothschilds reporting that he's born in Paris. And we just don't know what's real and what's false. Okay, we really don't know. But we do have this from the Rothschild Bank minutes here. It says he is born né le 21 December 1977 à Paris. And they do this again. And they just keep making this mistake that he's born in Paris. But it must have been a clerical error. Now, Emmanuel himself has never denied his closeness with the Rothschilds. In fact, he said this in 2012, and I quote, "I had a very unintelligible background. No one could understand me outside of Rothschild." Okay. And when he became the economic advisor to the socialist president Francois Hollande, he said that David de Rothschild, quote, knows about my commitment. What? What are we talking about? What are you saying? What are you saying, Emmanuel Macron? You're going to be his protector when you get into power? I'm going to read you this passage regarding him climbing the ladder at the Rothschild Bank, because apparently his rise made no sense to his colleagues. This is from Xavier's book, quote, within the bank, Emmanuel Macron's progress surprised many. Cyril Harfouche explained that he, quote, had been identified as a very singular personality with a lot of contacts. And Sophie Javari, who trained him at Rothschild & Co., reports that he, quote, had very high-level contacts for our files with links to the state, end quote. According to her, her most experienced colleagues were surprised by his, quote, supports at the top level of the bank, notably David de Rothschild and his right-hand man, Francois Henrot, who occasionally allowed him to, quote, bypass his immediate hierarchy. This support enabled him to become, at the age of 32, the youngest managing partner in the bank's history, even though, according to other employees, he was a poor technician. Quote, Macron doesn't know much about it. Quote, in meetings, we giggle and think ardently, here's another Macron gem. Now, reporting on other confidences from Rothschild & Co. executives, journalist Mark Endeweld confirms the bitterness aroused by his accelerated promotion. Quote, at Rothschild, he has the reputation of never having written an equation. He didn't even know what EBITDA is, the operating profit of a company. David de Rothschild had to, quote, violate them to appoint him to managing partner. Okay, the idea of a managing partner of Rothschild Bank not knowing what EBITDA stands for, like that. I'm not a financial institution over here. Earnings before interest and tax. He didn't know what that was, and so people around Rothschild who watched his rise and were bitter about it and knew that David de Rothschild had a hand in this. Again, you can read about this in the Wall Street Journal's book. You can read about this in Mark Endeweld's book, The Ambiguous Past of Macron. People don't understand how he was just sort of elevated at this bank. And by the way, that elevation actually took place before he even got to the Rothschild's bank. It also took place in school. So we were told he was Mozart, right? We were told that this kid just had it. He just was so brilliant. They're going to find this other point to be quite odd. In 2002, when he was 25 years old, Emmanuel Macron was admitted into ENA. That's a school. It's basically the National School of Administration, a hyper elite French graduate program. It's the best way for me to explain it to English listeners, okay? Yet he failed entry into this school twice. And then he was magically admitted without having to answer the question that was asked during the oral exam. That's a component of getting into this school, this elite school, which essentially you have to attend to get like a high level job as a financial executive. They just allowed him to be admitted without doing the oral exam, like that's ever been done before, okay? Then somehow he ends up in the top rankings of his class and is able to join the Inspector Generals of Finances. And his students around him, his colleagues around him, clearly knew that he was an idiot and that meant that the rankings were cooked. So there was public backlash amongst the other students within his year. They literally mobilized against the fraudulent results, which then led to the Council of the State having to intervene and cancel the school rankings for that year for the first time in the school's history, okay? For the first time in the school's history. Could you imagine this? Like an MBA program, and you're like, this kid's an idiot. I don't even know how he got here. And then they released the rankings, like, actually, he's the smartest kid in the class. And then they all went, okay, what is going on here? Clearly, this is cooked. This is completely cooked. And they get the council involved, the state council involved, and they go, you know what? How about just no results this year? Like, what? A quick little point on that, by the way, is that in 2021, when Emmanuel Macron was president, he decided to essentially cancel the ENA. He's like, oh, we actually need more diversity in banking, so we shouldn't even have this program. This is ridiculous. This is crazy. We just need to have more diversity. Yeah, okay, buddy. I'm sure that's what it is. It sounds like maybe your entire career you were just being prepared for this moment of becoming the president of France. And you actually, what you are is the only thing we can verify, which is a drama student. You know how to act. You know how to act and pretend that you are the president while there is clearly somebody behind you that has been moving you all through life. Another odd point was that when he was admitted into the Rothschild Bank in 2008, he was supposed to have publicized an order from the minister which granted him leave from compulsory civil service. For whatever reason, he was exempt from that compulsory procedure. So he didn't even have to reinstate his civil service when he then left the bank and was magically appointed, right, to President Holland's team as an economic advisor. Like, what? In fact, the deputy chairman of the Council for State Legal Ethics spoke out about this. He remarked that he had never seen anything like it. He had never seen someone given an exemption on this, not having to go by certain steps. I'm sure just like the students at the ENA had never seen someone who couldn't even get into the school, who clearly was not at the top of the class, magically be awarded and being told, like, actually, that's the brightest kid in the class, actually. Here we go. And they were outraged. And they should have been outraged. And the people that work with him at Rothschild Banks were similarly outraged. This guy doesn't even know what EBITDA is. It sounds like actually he's an idiot. He's an idiot when it comes to finances. And he probably could not wax poetic about anything. And he is just performative. It makes me think of the story of that politician when he's talking about Pyrenean. Oh, my grandmother, is she, all that my great-grandparents wanted was for her to learn French, and because she only spoke Pyrenean. And he's like, that's not a language. It's not a language. That's why I say this reminds me of the Manchurian Candidate. Now, regarding the Rothschilds family, there is so much that I could say here, but I do not want this episode to get hit on YouTube. Suffice it to say, you could look up any of them. The proven ties to Jeffrey Epstein, the various pedophilic and incest scandals which are abound and have surrounded this family. You could look up anything, but know that any journalist who begins to write about this in France has to face anti-Semitism charges, right? You can't, oh gosh, God forbid you actually report on facts pertaining to the Rothschilds family and their empire. What we'll do instead here is leave you with what Xavier Poussard said, because I think he summed it up quite brilliantly regarding the Rothschilds. He wrote, notoriously, the Rothschilds' longevity and preservation of their fortune are based on an extensive practice of endogamy and alliances between cousins, essentially interbreeding. At a conference at the Museum of Art History, Natalie Reams, David de Rothschild's cousin, went further, declaring, quote, a very common practice in such families. Vice is nice, but incest is best because it stays in the family. We are simply raised to be silent so that nothing comes out. We are brought up with this weight to make sure, and it works, that we never speak out. Xavier concludes by saying words that echo what we encountered throughout our investigation of Brigitte, a family cloistered in silence, zealous to protect a family secret that has become a state affair. And I am telling you, on that closing chapter regarding the Rothschilds and the scandals abound, including scandals that pertain to David de Rothschild, you will want to pick up Xavier Poussard's book, Becoming Brigitte, because what I have given you thus far is truly the tip of the iceberg. I cannot explain to you how many pedophile scandals I have removed from this podcasting, again, because this is on YouTube, so I have to make this as rated G as I possibly can. It cannot continually be the case that these are all just coincidences, okay? There's just way too many coincidences adding up. You can't play the all my homies are pedophiles and trans except for me card. I don't know. I just would feel a little bit weird about that, right? If you just had an individual in your life and you're like, I swear everyone around me is involved in this, but it's not me, right? That's kind of what Emmanuel Macron is trying to sell to us right now. Everyone's involved in all this stuff, but not me. I now look at him having come out of that book and I think he's an idiot. He's just a puppet. And he has been groomed from the time that he was a child, but groomed by who? Who is his father? Who is his father? If he doesn't have this relationship with Jean-Michel, and we found out all throughout this affair that he doesn't really seem to have close relations with his parents. Were these his doctors, perhaps? I don't know. You can ask pointed questions to them, but they don't want to answer any of these questions because they know that we have figured out the game. And the game is that you have to be very precise in how you ask them questions because they can change identities and they can change names. The family has this capacity. So if you are wondering the answer to why it is that Xavier Poussard has never been sued by the Macron family, what is it exactly that saved Xavier Poussard? Whereas the women, Natasha Ray and Amandine Roy, who did wonderful work, ended up getting sued for little mistakes. The answer is actually kind of funny because it kind of boils down to the differences between men and women. So I would say that women, first and foremost, tend to be more intuitive. We are more intuitive. We go with our guts. I say this all the time to my husband. This person just gives me a bad vibe. I don't trust this person. I tend to go with my gut a lot more. I do believe that we have God's intuition, especially when it comes to our children. But men tend to be a bit more technical, right? Where they will just need to mathematically compute something to be sure about something, and they'll question things and maybe not go with their gut all the time or go with their gut at all. And so that is really what happened with Natasha Ray and Xavier Poussard. So Xavier Poussard used a technology. I mentioned it to you on last week's episode or a couple of days ago on the episode, but I want to demonstrate that technology for you because when he said it to me, my girl brain just sort of went, okay, I'm not into AI, I'm not into tech. But then when he explained to me that this technology known as Face Plus Plus is basically the World Economic Forum's has listed it amongst its 11 smartest companies, okay? It is headquartered in Beijing, China. As I mentioned to you, it is what China uses as their software for facial recognition. And when he showed me how accurate it is, I was positively shocked. I genuinely shocked, amazed, and then terrified about the direction of the world when you think about these globalists who I believe want to turn us into like sort of these technological slaves, and recognizing that this artificial intelligence is bang on accurate. And so, yes, it's valued at $1 billion from the WF website. It tells us that it was founded in 2011, and it is a leader in machinery, visual, artificial intelligence industry and face recognition systems. So I want to show you, like, just as he was showing me this technology, and I was kind of testing it to see if it could get something wrong, just how accurate it could be. Because we now live in an age of plastic surgery, right? Women can literally change their faces. And the fact that this technology is still able to process who that person is amazing to me. So here's an example, and this is also featured in his book. But I want to point out Kim Basinger there on the right, who has modified her face a lot, okay? It still knows, it is looking and it is saying, yeah, no, that's still Kim Basinger. And it comes back with a percentage and is telling you, essentially, you get into the 75% range, you get above 70%, and it is very high. Like, yes, we are certain that that is her. And it is her. It is accurately her. I'm also going to show you that it is able even to take a childhood photo. And even though that might make it lower or decrease, and you may not get into the 70 range, you may get into the high 60 range, it is still able to tell you that, yes, this is the correct person. So you're seeing here Shirley Temple on the bottom there, Hillary Clinton. I mean, her face really hasn't changed much from the time that she was a child, but 78% confidence. On the top there, of course, you've got Princess Diana. You've got the Queen. It's able to come back and to say to you, despite all of this time and age, that this is the same person, which is incredible, like I said. Then this is the reason, by the way, which to me, I would have been, if I had to place a bet on a horse, I would have bet on Natasha Ray and her instincts. When she first saw that photo of Andre Lewis at his wedding, and then she found out that he had a cousin who was named John Louise. Okay. So just looking at this photo on the left, there is the wedding photo, obviously the groom. On the right there is his cousin. That's John Louise. So I would have thought the same person. So she looked at this photo and she's like, no, I actually think that the person in the photo is this guy. And I think that they're playing us. And that if I had just looked at these photos and trusted my own eyes, I would have totally co-signed to what Natasha Ray said. That looks to be the exact same person. But Xavier Poussard, so Natasha said that or wrote that, and she got sued for defamation. Xavier Poussard instead ran these two photos in his technology, and it told him no. It said it's not the same person. In Face++, it came back 52% low. So he said, okay, I must be missing something. I'm going to rely on technology. It's telling me that these are two different people. And they look so much, these first cousins look a lot alike, but the technology picked it up. And of course, we then learned, as we covered yesterday, or 2 days ago rather, that it actually was a different person, that John Louis Ozier was a first cousin. He was not, in fact, the same person that was pictured there, which is the reason that she got sued for defamation. Again, not attacking the substance of her claims, not attacking whether or not Brigitte had transitioned from Jean-Michel Trogneau, rather attacking an error that is going to happen as you're investigating a story and when people are refusing to give you any answers, and in many times intentionally sending you down the wrong path, right? So regarding Brigitte Macron, who has now changed her face, as we learned, we know that she's seeing this doctor, she's getting feminization surgery. This is a good way. And plus, she's now in her 80s, right? And we've got only pictures from her childhood, only pictures of Jean-Michel Trogneau from his childhood. When you compare this with the tech returns this way. It tells us that this is a high probability, and this is with dentured teeth, different teeth, right? It is telling us that this is this boy in this school photo, okay? This is this boy in this school photo. It is returning from normal to highest being there at 17.3%, and that's just with the school photo and with years of work. Okay, we're not even comparing this to the school photos when she still had the teeth that you see there on the left-hand side, right? When Brigitte still had teeth. This is with a ton of work being done by the magician to the transgendered community, right? A guy that can make you a woman. He looks at you, looks at women like they're clay. And it is still certain that that is Brigitte Macron, okay? That little boy became Brigitte Macron. It is also certain that the woman in the wedding photo, so more aged on, Brigitte Trogneau, who married Andre Lewis, is not the First Lady Brigitte Macron that we see today. It is returning low probability that these are the same people. What's going on here? What do you mean it's returning low probability? This maybe gives us the answer to why she will not answer. She will not join a lawsuit and assert formally by just saying, that is me in the photo, okay? She will not answer my questions as we've had our legal team go out and we have said, we don't want to lie. Just like Xavier, we're not here in the business to spread lies, okay? Doesn't help me. Doesn't make my audience want to come back to my show when I get busted intentionally lying and defaming someone for the sheer sport of it. Help me help you, Brigitte. Is this you in the wedding photo? She doesn't want to answer that question, okay? Well, if we turn to AI technology, the reason why she's not answering that question is because it's not her in the photo, okay? That is somebody else. And that somebody else went by the name Brigitte Trogneau. So it's very interesting. Jean-Michel Trogneau at that wedding. We're not allowed to see any photos of him at that wedding because apparently all photos have been destroyed other than 2 lingering photos of of Andre Lewis, and same for Brigitte Trogneau. We are just finding that despite all photos that should be made available, we can't even get our hands on school photos. School photos. They don't want to give them. They don't want to give them up. Nothing exists. It's just all been deleted. A whole person just got deleted. Okay. And regarding the communion photo, which we instantly looked at and said, that looks nothing like the first lady. I'm looking at my eyes. It returned this answer. The text says, no. Again, low. Nope. Not happening. Sorry. Ain't her. Okay. So what do we discern from that? What we discern from that is that the photos that Mimi Marchand, Best Image Agency, Mimi Marchand, who's up with the gangsters doing work, making sure that pedophile scandals don't hit the press, disgusting pedophile scandals. She's stopping that from hitting the press. She's the popess of the celebrity media, doesn't print without her say-so. The person that documentary filmmakers have to go through to get any images of the First Lady. And then when they get these images, there are few and far between. 3 entered into the public arena of her childhood. And all of those photos, 1 or 2 from her childhood rather, and 1 from her marriage, alleged marriage. Well, Chinese tech software sanctioned by the WEF as the best in the game is telling us that that is not the current First Lady of France. What are we to make of that? What are we to make of that? The silence, the punking, the intimidation techniques, going after people for taxes, sending the figurative or the French IRS to go after people when they can't get them on defamation, going after trying to figure out who's funding people. Us having had, as we did in the past, our interview with Xavier Poussard taken down from YouTube for weird reasons, demanding censorship, accusing Xavier Poussard of anti-Semitism for an article that he wrote had nothing to do, by the way, with anything pertaining to Brigitte Macron. But he said the article he wrote 5 years ago about the power who controls all the media in France. They're coming after him for anti-Semitism. He didn't even say these people are Jewish. He just wrote the names of the people who have power in the media in France. They're looking for anything, as opposed to just what? Showing us photos of your life married to Andre Lewis? Are you going to tell us that that has similarly also been destroyed? Or are we to make of this that the person that is living in the Élysée Palace, the person who definitively groomed the president, who actually has not been so honest about his background, who is not the genius virtuoso that has been presented to the public, Brigitte Macron, perhaps, is Jean-Michel Trogneau. Jean-Michel Trogneau, who during a transition, the picture that I'm seeing right now, and I'm happy to correct it again because I know you guys are watching at the Élysée Palace, please just answer our 21 questions, because the picture that I'm getting from all of this, and again, we have not even gotten to Xavier Poussard's explosive interview, is that something happened in the 80s. Something happened in the mid-70s and the 80s. Veronique Drew, Jean-Michel Trogneau, your reappearance in 1986 as a teacher, the lies that you have told sexy Claudia Schiffer. She didn't exist then. I don't see a woman with legs irresistible that the young boys just couldn't wait. Oh my God, look at that. What are you talking about? Who sanctioned these lies in the press? Who are you really? And what is your relationship to Emmanuel Macron? What is Emmanuel Macron's relationship to you? What is the relationship between Emmanuel Macron and Jean-Jacques? It's not feeling like a nephew to me. I don't know. Something feels off there when I look at that picture. Something feels very wrong there. And of course, it's so simple to answer these questions, and yet you refuse to. You go so far as to try to intimidate an American journalist. And I got to tell you, it doesn't make you look anything but extremely guilty. That's what I will say about that topic. I'm now going to, before I get into a few of your comments, remind you guys about American financing, because I know the average person finds it difficult to keep up with monthly expenses. In most cases, there is little left at the end of the month to cover any extras. Most Americans aren't getting a big raise. Expenses are up, and it is very hard to manage without using credit cards. So if you're a homeowner and you're frustrated with that cycle, I need you to make a 10-minute, no-obligation call today to my friends at American Financing. If you're carrying a credit card balance each month with a rate in the 20s or even the 30s, American Financing can show you how to put your hard-earned equity to work and get you out of debt. Their salary-based mortgage consultants are saving their customers an average of $800 a month. And if you get started today, you may not even have to make next month's mortgage payment. There are no upfront fees, so it costs nothing to find out how much you could be saving every month. So call American Financing today at 800-795-1210. Again, that's 800-795-1210, or visit americanfinancing.net/Owens. That's americanfinancing.net/Owens. All right, guys. So we are going to premiere the Xavier Poussard interview. I wanted to do one more episode of this because there are things that he was speaking about that I wanted to make sense to you when he talks about the software that has really saved him from making any errors or making any assumptions that would have given them the ability to pounce. And so we will premiere the first part of the interview here on YouTube, and then we will put the rest of it on CandaceOwens.com, which is running and amazing thanks to Patmos, which is the great team that put together our website. They are the most trusted alternative to big tech hosting, and their service is excellent. The hosting is secure, and I'm now officially free to say anything that I want on the show without the fear of being canceled by my web host. So we're grateful to Patmos, patmos.tech. If you're one of those individuals who is looking for that freedom as well, you can make the switch and have them host things for you at patmos.tech. All right, let's get into some of your comments. I know some of you guys actually bought the book already, Xavier Poussard's book, Becoming Brigitte, and you've skipped and learned more. And like I said, I have not even scratched the surface. And so after we show you our interview, we will then get into even more, because you will have questions about who they are now trying to go back and present and suggest could be Jean-Michel Trogneau. Those of you who have gotten there about the little chubby guy that they're trying to say is Jean-Michel Trogneau, who curiously didn't stand with his family at the inauguration, but stood with the Rothschilds. We'll get into all of that probably in an episode after the interview with Xavier, so that you can put that piece together. Suffice it to say, the AI tech says no. That is not Jean-Michel Trogneau. This person, Dehend, writes, Candace, shame on you for sending me down this rabbit hole with you for truth, because now I'm all in. Something is definitely fishy about Mr. First Gentleman Brigitte Macron. The gig is up. I agree. Christine writes, thank you, Candace, for who you are and all that you do. Chris writes, you may remember me from earlier in the year for finding a beautiful Bible on the ground while walking my dog. I attended my first Catholic Mass this morning and wanted to share. Thanks for helping me find Christ. God bless you. Such an amazing, amazing story. Jessica Wickers writes, I am loving these investigative series. Your thoroughness is amazing with baby number 4 on the way. And given your previous hospital experiences, are you planning a home birth or are you working with a midwife? I would be very happy if I had my baby at home, but my husband won't let me plan that. He's like, everything's been smooth. You have very easy pregnancies and we've had good births. I did have one very bad hospital experience and we ended up checking my baby out of there. But that was really more over vaccines and medicine rather than like my birth actual experience. And so he doesn't want to switch up the formula. We're at odds there, but I would love to give birth at home. So I may just go into labor and not tell him until the baby's just about to come out. Sis Holiday writes, point of view, me asking everyone in my life, did you know the president of France's wife is a man? Yeah, you know what's really interesting is that now you go back when I first got into the story and I announced it on my previous podcast, and the journalists that instantly rushed to call it insane, those are people that you should be very concerned of. I call out Bari Weiss all the time because she wrote like a whole article about me. People were trying to use like Sigmund Freud psychology to be like, oh, she must be having a mental breakdown. Could you imagine trying to assign hysteria to someone who's looking into a story of perversion and pedophilia and grooming? What does that tell you about our mainstream media apparatus? It should tell you that they do not work for the people. They work to protect the state and whoever is running the state. And this is a story, like I said, that is global. I think there are too many similarities between the upbringing of Emmanuel Macron, and as we talked about, the upbringing of Kamala Harris, the upbringing of Barack Obama, you know, these people being raised by their grandparents at a time when we know that the MK Ultra program was running, and there is something very, very wrong there. Too many comparisons is what I would say. Luke writes, dig, dig, and dig. Find out who is hiding behind this person. 47 versus a 14-year-old, not okay. What is going on with the elites? This is bad. She was, you meant to say 37. Sorry, she was 14. She was 39. Christian Fortin writes, our sincere salutations to Emmanuel Macron, Brigitte Macron, Jean-Michel Trogneau, Lillian de Rothschild, Pedafine Ozier, and JJ Trogneau, who are all one way or another with us tonight. Indeed, they are. I'm hearing rumors that Emmanuel Macron, is even looking at trying to hire people in public relations to deal with the fracturing of his image. And Tiffany is quiet. I've got a lot of questions about her. The only child that seems to really speak out. And it's interesting because we, like I said, don't know what happened to Brigitte Trogneau, but we know that whatever did happen to the real Brigitte Trogneau, Tiffany would have been too young to remember her. So I find that to be of some interest. And that's why we have created a timeline, which we should share with you all so that you can just capture kind of the movements here, like a timeline of Brigitte Trogneau, a timeline of Jean-Michel Trogneau, sort of like the wiping and the disappearing of them both, the reemergence of Brigitte Ozier, or later to be Macron, is just, it's too perfect of a story when you start to look at it. But anyways, you guys, just reminding you, if you want to support our work, please go to CandaceOwens.com. You can give whatever you want. You can also sign up. We have an entire series on vaccines. You can also support by buying my sophomore book, which is available for pre-sale. Head to CandaceOwens.com. There's so many ways to support independent journalists and people that are just taking these risks and telling these stories, because I do think that we're experiencing this global awakening, and we are realizing that something very dark and something very perverse is going on, and that there are too many powers that are trying to suppress us having that conversation. And it's going to take all of us kind of supporting one another and educating one another in order for us to realistically be able to change things for our children. And that's my investment in this, by the way. That's my skin in this game, is that I've got kids that have to grow up in this world. And the more that I learn about things that have happened and things that are happening, it terrifies me. And so I don't keep my mouth shut. How am I doing, Emmanuel Macron, on shutting up? You did tell me to shut up pretty much in a lot of words, in 100 pages. You said, don't say anything. And I did not say anything. I failed really bad at not saying anything. I'm just not good at that. It's not my thing. Anyways, you guys, we will see you tomorrow.